Hello. Thank you all for joining us today. As always, I'm just going to give it a few seconds to let people come in and get settled, and then we'll go over some housekeeping, and then we'll start today's webinar. So again, I want to say thank you so much for being here today. Bianca and myself will be here monitoring the chat. If you have any sort of technical issues, just let us know in the chat. We'll help you. We'll work with you on that. If there's something off with the audio or the visual, again, just put that in the chat. Captions are available, and you can click the captions and move them around your screen to where they're most comfortable for you. You can also get a transcript going on the side of your screen so it won't be in front of the presentation. So thank you again for coming to our final part 4 of our Domestic Violence and People with Disabilities series. Today we are talking about, well, not we, Ember is talking about building connections, and there'll be some Q&As. So if you have any questions, like Ember just put in the chat, you can put them in the chat, or you can use the Q&A box and ask questions that way. And you can do that at any time during the session. So we are joined today by Ember. Ember Maselli, MSW, is a social worker, researcher, and trainer with over a decade of experience working at the intersections of domestic violence, mental health, and substance use. Ember has conducted and supported mixed methods research, evaluation, and training initiatives to inform healthcare, social services, education, and public policy. Ember leads with survivor-centered, peer-led approaches with a focus on equity and accessibility. They have a special interest in disability justice, traumatic brain injury, and people with lived experience working in the DV movement. Ember holds an MSW from Florida State University and lives in Chicago with her daughter and 2 dogs. Ember also put their email address in the chat, so if you have any questions afterwards, you can of course ask then. But without further ado, Ember, thank you so much for presenting this 4-part series for us. This is such an important topic, and I'm just so happy that you can do this.
Thank you so much, Erin and Bianca, and everybody else who's joined us today. Like Erin said, my name is Ember, and today we're just going to talk a little bit more about domestic violence and people with disabilities and talk about building connections. And so, what that's really going to focus on is like how to have conversations about domestic violence as an ally, as somebody who's trying to provide support, because that's something that can be kind of daunting and overwhelming, especially when we're talking with folks who also have disabilities, because we know that that can make the way that we move through life a little more difficult. And we may have some barriers that we face that other folks are not. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Like Erin said, please, if you have questions, put them in the chat or in the Q&A box. And I will address them as they come up. If there's something that you have a question about or a concern about that you'd rather me answer privately, or you just want to talk about it separately, please feel free to email me. My email address is in the slides, in the chat. Erin will probably share it again. It's a secure email. No one has access to it. I keep confidentiality, so that's there if anybody would like it. And yeah, this is just my little about me to get to know me. If you've been here for all 4, you've seen this 4 times, and I apologize for that. And if not, here are the beautiful faces of my dogs. Yeah, I live in Chicago. My background has been in social work, and I have focused on domestic violence basically my entire career. Domestic violence and healthcare with a focus on mental health, substance use, and disability is kind of where I mainly reside in my work right now. I've worked as an advocate in a domestic violence shelter. I've worked in hospitals as an advocate. I've worked on college campus as an advocate. And then I've worked as a researcher, an evaluator, and a trainer. And so that's kind of where I mostly live right now. Yeah, so today what we're going to talk about is I'm going to do a tiny bit of review. I've been doing a little bit of review every time. This will be kind of our shortest little review, just to make sure we're all on the same page. And then we'll identify some ways to support survivors of domestic violence with disabilities. A lot of what we talk about today is going to mainly just focus on survivors in general, All of this will be applicable to any survivor that you might interact with or any person who may be experiencing unhealthy relationship dynamics. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody with disabilities, but I will talk about that a little less than I have previously, just because, again, a lot of this is very general, but I will try to touch on where disabilities can change or give us opportunities to kind of strengthen the way that we support folks. And I'll also talk a little bit about how to build connections with community organizations, just a little bit on that. Ultimately, just to understand how we can support people with disabilities who are facing domestic violence. We know that we all probably know somebody who has experienced domestic violence, will experience it, or has experienced unhealthy things in their relationship that are maybe leading down that path. So I want us all to feel a little more supported in that and having a few more tools up our sleeve to be able to have those tough conversations. Um, this is the last of our series. Here are the other presentations that I've done. At the end of the slide, I should have linked it up here too. At the end, I've linked to the New Jersey Self-Advocacy project and where they have all the webinars uploaded. So those will have video, which will be kind of what you're seeing here with my voice in the background. And then there's also slides. I think I owe 2 decks to Erin and Frankie and Bianca. So those will get up soon, but they will all be there. So we've previously talked about prevalence and types of abuse, the dynamics and systemic barriers, what we can do with like prevention and education and support. And then today is really about what that support piece looks like. So building those connections. I don't know that this will take the whole hour we have. We'll kind of see where we end up. It depends on where the conversation goes, if anything comes up, things like that. But we'll see. We'll have, I say all that to say that we'll have time for questions at the end if you want to talk to me directly, if you want to chat offline, if you want to send an email, that will all be available as well. And I'm not in New Jersey, but I am pretty well connected with organizations in the New England area along the East Coast. So I will do my best to also help with that if I can. If not, I know people who know people, so we'll figure it out. All right. Just a few notes. With the language I use, I'll use the term survivor most of the time to talk about someone who's experienced domestic violence. And I'll use the term abuser or abusive partner to talk about someone who has caused abuse. Some people use victim, some people will use abuser or perpetrator or batterer or all sorts of other terms. These are just the terms I use. No term is really wrong. I just want to use the terms that are as empowering and helpful as possible. And whenever I'm working with somebody, I'm going to use the terms that they want me to use. But since today I'm just kind of talking at you, I'm going to use these terms. We're not going to talk a whole lot about gender or prevalence today, but domestic violence is a gender-based phenomenon, which means that it's primarily perpetrated by men and primarily perpetrated against women. It does not mean that that's how it always happens. It does not mean that women cannot perpetrate domestic violence, and it doesn't mean that men cannot be survivors. It doesn't mean that it can't happen in LGBTQ relationships and queer relationships. It can happen anywhere, but it is a gender-based violence phenomenon. So we are going to typically see those power dynamics play out. So sometimes the information I have will only be about men abusing women, even though that's not the whole picture. But I will let you know when I'm talking about something like that, when there are limitations. And we've talked about before, it can be just tricky to find data on all of this. We're not going to be talking about a lot of data today, but just something I wanted to include because it's something we've talked about before. A lot of these studies, we know domestic violence is very underreported. A lot of it is aggregated. So we're only seeing what happens at the state or federal level. We're not seeing individual differences. And oftentimes it's hard to get data out in a timely manner. So some of the studies that I had to look up today are 15 years old because that's kind of the best data I can find that's the most recent. So just something to remember as we're going through. And another thing is to just take care of yourself. This isn't going to be as heavy as some of the other conversations that I have had with you all, but it can still be very challenging. So If you need to, close your eyes and just listen, if you need to stand up and stretch, please do that. If it's a little too overwhelming right now, or you've got too much going on, and this is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, close out the chat and come watch the video later. I want you to stay, but I also want you to take care of yourself. So if that's something that you can do to help maintain your peace, please do that. Also, if looking at these 6 baby capybaras makes you happy, then I support that as well. Unfortunately, they won't stay on the screen the whole time, but they're there in spirit. So you can take a mental snapshot and come back to it, because I know I will be. So we're going to jump in just to our quick review of what is domestic violence. And I just want us to remember this definition, because it has a couple of important things in it that we've talked about before, and I've bolded them in purple for our ease of reading. But domestic violence, sometimes called intimate partner violence, is a pattern of intentional behaviors intended to assert power and control over a partner or former partner. So the important thing that we want to remember is that this is a pattern of behaviors that are intentional, and it's to assert power and control over somebody. And I want us to really think about that power and control piece today as we move through this, because we have an opportunity as somebody who is an ally or a friend of folks who are survivors to be somebody who helps give them power and control back. If someone who's lost their power and control, if someone comes to me and says, you know, my husband is treating me this way, I'm feeling unsafe, I don't know what to do, and I say, you have to call the police, you have to stay with me, we're going to go pick up a bag right now and go, and this is what has to happen. I have taken away their control in that situation. They've told me that they're experiencing something where their power and control is being taken away at home, and I have brought that power and control into our relationship, my relationship with that survivor, that friend, that person I'm trying to support. And it's not intentional. It's not me trying to be rude or overpowering or domineering. It's not that I think I know better than they do, because after 15 years of working in this field, I do not know better than somebody who knows their partner. I do not know better. And so we really want to think about how we can give power and control back to somebody. If somebody comes to me and is talking to me about what happens, I need to be thinking about how I can give them opportunities to feel empowered and feel in control of what's going on the best I can. It's not an easy job. It's not an easy thing to do as an advocate in a professional role, as a therapist, as a doctor, or as a friend. It's a very difficult thing to do. But I just want us to think about power and control, and how things that we say, even being well-intentioned, can reproduce those negative feelings of being disempowered and having a lack of control. All right. So we've talked about this a lot, different abuse tactics that can occur in domestic violence. Of course, we know physical abuse is something that's talked about a lot, kind of the first thing we think of. But there's also all these other forms of abuse: sexual abuse, emotional, financial, isolation, spiritual abuse, stalking, cyber abuse, restricting access to care. We talked a lot last time and the time before about different ways that survivors with disabilities can have their power and control taken away by manipulating their access to resources, to accessibility devices, even things like a phone or a computer. Taking those away from somebody who relies on them because they are disabled can be a bigger barrier than somebody who maybe does not have those same disabilities or is not disabled. We've also kind of used this visual of a door with locks on it to think about all the different ways that these different abuse tactics can keep someone locked in a relationship. How physical abuse, the threat of emotional abuse, maybe the threat of having their children removed or losing their housing, are kind of more locks on their door. And then locks can come from other places too. We talked about how maybe law enforcement could be a lock on the door because maybe somebody had a bad experience, or they're afraid of what it might be like for them as a person of color to go to law enforcement, or as a queer person, or as someone with a disability. They might have had bad experiences either in their own personal life or in their community that keep them from wanting to do that. So I also want us to think of ourselves. It's possible that we become a lock on someone's door. If someone comes to me and says that they are worried about their relationship, and I start saying, well, why are you even still with him? What are you doing? What's going on? Why would you think this is okay? You know it's not okay to be treated like this. Would you let them treat your sister like this? Would you let me date someone like this? No, you wouldn't. Why are you doing this? If I start really digging in and making this person feel shame and blame for what has happened to them, I'm becoming a lock on the door. And the next time my friend wants to come to me and talk to me because something's wrong, they're going to remember how I treated them. And that's going to be another lock on their door. And so I want us to try to think about how we cannot become another lock. We don't necessarily have to become a key, but we don't want to become another lock. Um, so yeah, building these connections with survivors, this is like the very simplistic version of what we're talking about today, compressed into one slide, but it's really involves kind of four main things. There are lots of things, but these are kind of the four things that I can distill it down to. It's listening openly. So we are more than anything trying to just let someone come to us and be honest and open about what they're experiencing, and therefore listening openly ourselves and providing privacy and non-judgment. Again, not asking those, why did you do that? Why would you let him do this? Why didn't you tell me? Why would you think it's okay? Just providing privacy and non-judgment, not telling them that you're going to tell other people, making sure you're having these conversations with them in a setting that is safe for them and not ambushing them at their house when their partner's there or something like that. Because we want to continue to be a safe person for a survivor to talk to. Um, that's what kind of all of this leads to. And we want to avoid trying to fix everything. Like I said, we might see that there are clearly keys to help open up all these doors. But first of all, we don't know if that's true. And we don't know if the person that we're talking to is ready to start digging through the big pile of keys. We're not there to try to fix everything. The first thing that we're really trying to do is to listen and be a safe person for them to talk to. It's not problem solving, it's just companionship and listening. Problem solving may happen. It may be something that someone wants to do with you, but when we're talking about building connection, how we keep that friendship or that relationship where we feel like we can speak openly, that's kind of what we're focusing on. Okay. I'm just looking at time. You all are doing so great. This is going great. Okay. So I want you to imagine a scenario with me. And before we even start, don't think about something that's big and scary. I want us to think about something that is negative but normal. So I want you to close your eyes or just relax your focus and think about a time when something went wrong and you talked to a friend or a loved one about it. Again, nothing big and scary. And again, some of these things might be big and scary depending on who you are, but I'm thinking of things like having a flat tire, losing your wallet, you spilled your coffee in the car on the way to work. You had a negative interaction with the doctor. You ripped your pants before your American Idol audition. I don't know what your life looks like. I hope that that is something that maybe is possible for this group. Not the pants ripping, but I support you in your singing endeavors. So I just want you all to know that. Maybe you twisted your ankle or cut your fingernail too short. I'm just thinking about something small that happened but really was annoying. Something wrong happened and you went and talked to somebody about it. So I want you to kind of think about that. And I was trying to think of examples to share with you all as I was writing this and I didn't land on anything. So I will keep thinking as I go through the next slide. So please, sorry that the text is overlapping. I'll fix that before I send it over so you all can download it. But when you're thinking about this thing that went wrong, I want you to think about who was around, who you reached out to, who you talked to. Sometimes we don't get the chance to reach out. Sometimes people just respond because they're there. But how did they respond? How did that make you feel? What did they wish that you had said instead? Um, I have an example that's maybe a little too serious. I told you all not to think of something big and scary, but this is the example that came to my mind, and it's also disability focused. So I will go ahead and share that with you all. It's nothing super heavy, but I had a concussion. This was years and years ago. I had gotten a concussion and I was in college at the time. And so I had driven home. I had a friend drive me home, and I was getting some testing done back home for health insurance reasons. And I was going through a really bad time, and I was in my room, my childhood bedroom, really upset, crying, in pain, had a migraine. And my mom came in and she said, I've had a concussion too before. You're not the only one who's suffering. And you need to kind of rethink this because this is not the end of the world. Now, what my mom might have been trying to say was, this isn't as bad as you think. Everything's going to get better. You know, I want you to feel like this isn't going to be forever. But what I heard was, this isn't a big deal. You're not special. And it was not something that built connection between me and my mom. I didn't feel like the conversation would go anywhere that would make me feel better. And so that's a situation where the connection was cut off. Other examples that are lighter is like, I spilled my coffee all over my lap and I was late to work. And someone says, well, I've been telling you, you need a cup with a lid. Why don't you just get a Stanley with a lid and a straw? And then this wouldn't have happened, blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't make me feel good. It's like, I just wanted to complain that I spilled coffee all over myself. And now you're telling me that this is my fault and that you were right. And yeah, I should have got a lid. So now I'm sitting there thinking, like, yeah, I guess, Amanda's right. If I had just had the coffee cup with the lid that she told me I should get, this wouldn't have happened and I wouldn't have been late for work and whatever. It doesn't make you feel good. Um, or I got in a car accident and my neck really hurts. And they say, well, you always did drive too fast. What did you think was going to happen? Without them not even knowing the details of what happened. They just kind of go with a preconceived idea and run with it. None of this makes you feel good. So I want you to kind of think about when these things happen, what you wish someone would say instead. Um, and try to just sit with that. And one of the things that I will often ask my 7-year-old is, do you want to complain or do you want a solution? And it's not a judgment. Sometimes we just want to complain, and sometimes we want a solution, and sometimes we want to do both. We want to complain and then we want a solution, or we want to find a solution, but then go back and complain about what happened, for 15 minutes. That's fine. Um, but when we're thinking about someone coming to us with something as serious and heavy and possibly dangerous as domestic violence, we really want to be thinking about how we can be a positive interaction and build more connection rather than pushing them away. And sometimes we push people away without meaning to, or because we don't want to believe that what's happening is happening. And so we'll talk about that a little more. Oh, before we get into that, I am going to play a video about empathy because I think that's really a big way that we can kind of build connections is when we see somebody, we have this sad little fox who is having a bad day. I can't recall in the video what happened. And how we can be this good, empathetic bear who's building connection instead of driving things away. So I'm going to hit play. If there is a sound issue, let me know. Otherwise, I will assume it's working.
So we can't hear it.
Beautiful. Is it very low or you can't hear it all?
I couldn't hear anything.
Okay, hold on one second. I am
Um,
gonna,
when
yes,
you share, there's a button to share sound. See if
gotcha.
that's clicked.
Thank you. It worked like seamlessly before. I'm gonna share my whole screen and see if it works from YouTube and let me know if you can hear
No.
it. Now?
So what is empathy?
Still no?
A little, a little. It's like kind of broken up.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna reshare. And then if this doesn't work in a minute, we will pivot.
And then just make sure you click that button that says share sound on the right-hand side.
Let me go to share settings. Thank you for your patience, everybody. I don't
So
see.
when you go and you hit the share button,
Uh-huh.
On the right-hand side, there's some options. You're
Mine
gonna,
just says layout. Oh, it doesn't let me share sound. Hold on.
oh,
I wonder, it's like I can't click it.
let me make you a co-host and see if that helps. Try
Oh,
now.
yeah, I think that's what I was last time. Thank you for your patience, everybody. We're almost there.
I really want to see this video.
It's cute. I don't know why this is being so silly. Oh, here, computer audio. Oh, yeah, it won't let me. I don't know why.
That's so weird.
Can I send you the video and you share?
Absolutely.
Okay. 1 second. Oh my gosh. There's so many windows. Okay. Okay, I just put it in the chat.
Time to update what you think is possible.
Fuels connection, sympathy, drives
Beautiful.
disconnection. So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection, sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Thank you.
All right, she's all yours.
Am I back?
I don't. Oh, yep, there you are.
All right. That's one of my favorite. Thank you, Erin. I'm sorry, and thank you everyone for your patience on that. And Zoom's weird. It's worked every other time, so of course this time it's not going to. Um, yeah. So empathy and connection. That's one of my favorite videos. Brene Brown is like very popular in the DV world for lots of her really good insight on bravery and building connections and empathy. So if it's something you're interested in, I really recommend you check it out. She's got some really great TED Talks. If you're more into a quick video, she also has some longer books if you're into that. She's all over the place. And I have found nothing of hers that I don't like yet. So that's really great. Um, but yeah, there's some things that she said in there that were big takeaways for me when I first saw this. And I will admit that this was a video that I saw in a training about building connection with, in the instance I saw it was with people who had experienced adverse life experiences, negative experiences in childhood, things like child abuse and things like that. And what she says at the end is that rarely does trying to find a solution help, but building that connection does. And it's certainly not to say that finding a solution doesn't help, but when someone is first coming out and talking about needing help or wanting to just talk about their partner or the situation they're in, is we really just want to work on strengthening the connection, letting them know that, like, you brought up this topic of conversation and I'm still here. And I'm not that rude little ram or whatever it was offering you a sandwich from my nice place outside of the deep dark hole. So one of the first things that she talked about is perspective taking. So this is not only believing what someone tells you, but really thinking about what it might be like to be in that position. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to say, I know exactly how you feel, because none of us know exactly how someone else feels. What it more is about is just thinking about what they're going through, putting yourself in their shoes and believing that the experience that they had is what they're telling you. Another thing she talks about is staying away from judgment. So listening with kindness and openness and withholding that judgment, because there are judgments that we all have. And like she said, the little ram comes down with his paintbrush and starts putting the silver linings on the cloud. And that's because, like she said, someone has just told us something incredibly painful. We don't want to think that people we love or care about or people in our community are experiencing horrible things. So when they tell us, a lot of times our instinct is to put distance between that thing and what happened. This is a lot of times why we'll see people who experience, maybe I used to work at Florida State University as a victim advocate. So I would work with students who had experienced crimes. It was based on crimes in the police department. And so I would work with a lot of students who had experienced sexual assault. And one of the most common things that I would hear from school administrators, law enforcement, lawyers was, well, girls need to be more careful. What was she wearing? What was she doing? How could this have happened? I would never let my daughter do this. And I think that some of those people are, like, really irritating and causing a lot of really big problems for a lot of survivors. And at the same time, a lot of those people saying those things are saying them because they want to believe that their daughter would be able to protect herself from what happened to someone else's daughter or child or wife or sister or husband or brother or whoever. It's a way to put distance in between. But it's not helpful in this experience. It maybe is something that's an inside thought that you process with your own support system, with your own therapist, with your own, providers, not something that is really good to hash out when someone's coming to you for help or to talk about what's going on with them. And going with that is recognizing the emotions in others and meeting them where they are and try to stay a while. If someone is kind of being, if they're more in an anger or more emotional or more forgiving, just try to let them be that way. If they're there trying to defend their partner, you can let them do that. That's a very normal thing. No one wants to believe that the partner that they've been with could have done these things. So a lot of times you'll see from someone coming and saying, I know that what's going on isn't right, but he's really a good guy and we have this kid together and we just bought a house and I don't want to think all these bad things about him. It's important that we meet that person where they are. And I'll talk about my own personal experiences. I had experiences where a former partner of mine was being abusive and I wasn't ready to acknowledge it. And so when I would kind of complain about things he did with my friends, some of my friends would get very frustrated with me and be like, why are you letting him do this? What's going on? And those kind of conversations made me not want to share. It made me not want to share what was going on in my life because I felt like I always was having to defend myself and defend him. And that's not a situation I wanted to be put in. And it was very challenging for my friends. And I talk to them about that now. And I know that it was challenging because I've also been on the other end of that with my own friends and with my own, clients and survivors I've worked with in professional capacity. So it's a normal reaction for us to have as helpers to be frustrated and upset and want to defend our friend or this person who's come to us, but it might not be the most helpful in that moment when you're having this conversation. And then the last one that I think that came up in this video that relates to all of this is communication, being open and honest and having these conversations in a safe and private place. So if it's a conversation that you want to bring up yourself with somebody, if I wanted to, for example, talk to my sister about a relationship that she was in, it would probably be a better idea for me to have that conversation in private and not, in the middle of Chipotle, second Chipotle mention of the day. I think I know what I want for dinner. But it's something that I want to have that in a safe and private place. I also don't want to have it in our house when her boyfriend might come over. Or is, in the other room playing video games. It might be, I need to think about where is a safe place to have this conversation. Maybe I invite her over to my house and she knows that she can leave if she needs to. There's no one else there and we can have a private conversation. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes these things happen and a conversation needs to happen, or, that you need to talk to them about something, but trying to wait until things subside, until there is that safety and privacy to have the conversation is the best thing that you could do in that moment, usually. Obviously, if it's like a medical emergency, something like that, things change, but we're kind of talking about just having that simple conversation. All right. So this is the big question, right? That I think most of us have at some point or another when we're thinking about domestic violence and why don't they just leave? Why am I even having to have this conversation? What's going on? That's too big for me. Sometimes it feels like if someone comes to us and is telling us these horrible things about their partner, these terrible things that they've gone through, we wonder why won't they just leave this relationship? And there are so many things that keep someone from leaving, not just all of those locks on the door that we talked about, not just the threats of abuse and violence and child protective services, but things that go a little deeper than that are kind of part of who we all are as people. Things like having low self-esteem or feeling like, we still love that partner, or it's part of our cultural norms that we don't get divorced, or we work things out, or we don't go to therapy. Those things can make it very difficult for someone to not just leave, but to even start having the conversation with somebody about leaving. But the biggest thing that happens is fear. And I put this quote in. This is from Stephanie Klotz. She's the training manager at what used to be called the Jersey Battered Women's Center or Battered Women's Shelter. Now it's just called JBWS. She said that the majority of domestic violence homicides and most of all serious injuries in abusive relationships occur when the survivor ends the relationship. And so ending the relationship is the most dangerous time for someone in an abusive relationship. And this is something that a lot of survivors are aware of on some level and some don't know. And so this is why when we're having those first initial conversations with somebody, whether we're doing it as friends or I'm doing it in a professional capacity or otherwise, is we're not just jumping to, let's get you out of there. Let's see what we need to do to get you out of this home, because we know that the danger is there. We know that there can also be things like financial instability, just believing abuse is normal because maybe they grew up in a household where their parents treated each other like that and their siblings treated each other like that and their grandparents were like that, and the people at church were like that, the people at work. It just depends on what someone's experience is, but these things might keep them in that relationship. Embarrassment and shame, not wanting to admit that this has happened, maybe having low self-esteem, feeling like they deserve what's going on. Maybe they still love their partner. The majority of relationships don't start out with abuse. They start out with kindness. The first date doesn't usually end poorly if an abusive partner wants the relationship to keep going. A lot of times they're working to develop a close relationship with that person that they're going to abuse so that it becomes harder for them to leave. You've got to get them in the door before the locks can start going on. And so that is another reason why people might not just leave a relationship. And another big thing, and this is, I talked about this up top, but is that the majority of survivors stay with a partner longer than they wanted to for financial reasons. Sometimes because maybe they've just been a stay-at-home parent for years and they don't have the job experience and the income to be able to support themselves. Maybe there's also financial abuse that made it to where they haven't been able to keep a job or haven't been able to maintain a bank account. All of these things can make it more difficult for someone to leave. So these are things that we want at the top of our minds when we're going into that. This is my break for a stretch, but we have 15 minutes left. So our stretch is going to be very small and our breather is going to be very few breaths. But if your break needs to be longer, please take a longer break and stretch. I'm going to keep rolling through because I've been chatting more than I thought I was going to. So when we're talking to a survivor of domestic violence, some of this is going to be a review of what I already said, but we want to start the conversation when you both have time and privacy. So a safe, neutral environment, it's a conversation. We're not interrogating. We're not saying, why did this happen? What are you doing to stop it? When are you going to leave? Just being someone that they can talk to. You can still ask questions, but we don't want to interrogate. Usually if your question starts with a why or a how come or why didn't you, maybe that question is coming from a place of judgment and not from a place of like gathering information to be able to help them as well as you can. And you want to go with their speed. Usually when someone has that first conversation about things in their relationship not going well, they usually aren't starting out saying, my relationship's abusive. I want to leave. Here's my plan. How can you help me? A lot of time that conversation starts out with, you know, things with Charlie haven't been going well lately. He's just been so stressed at work. I think if we can kind of like reduce his stress and I can just, make sure that I'm doing everything right, things will be okay. And maybe you hear that conversation and you go, I don't know, this sounds kind of, I don't love what I'm hearing from my friend. But going at their speed, saying, I'm sorry you're going through a hard time. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about what's going on? What would be helpful to support you? Rather than going in and being like, I've always known Charlie was a scumbag. Like, let's pack your bags and go, girl. Like, that's not really going at their speed. If they're just starting to tell you this for the first time, you saying, let's pack a bag and hit the road isn't meeting them where they're at. It's also not respecting their boundaries for the conversation. We don't want to put words in their mouth. We don't want to say, Charlie's an abuser. You're a victim. You're being abused. This is domestic violence. That might not be helpful in that first conversation or the second, or it might be. It just depends on the person. But again, we're going to meet them where they are. Something that I do want to add, because anytime we're talking about domestic violence, different states have different laws about what is required to be reported to law enforcement. Sometimes if someone has like a gunshot wound, this is usually when we see the most like mandated reporting for domestic violence, is if someone's been shot. Those are things that have to be reported. I think in almost every state, gunshot wounds have to be reported by police or by medical professionals. So that's something to consider. But when we're talking about people with disabilities, a lot of people will think that they need to report this to Adult Protective Services. And that can be a helpful tool. And I'm not going to stand here and tell anybody in a recorded recording not to follow their legally mandated reporting duties and requirements. And we can be a little more strategic about them, because we know that calling Adult Protective Services can sometimes make abuse escalate, because that abusive partner is now aware that other people know what's going on. They might start restricting who the survivor can talk to. They might try to cut off their resources of friendship and of community because they're worried that more calls are going to be made. Of course, if someone with a disability is being abused in a way that Adult Protective Services needs to be informed to intervene, then that needs to happen. And a lot of folks are overly ambitious with what they think needs to be reported. And we want to do the best we can to let survivors decide who gets told what. Obviously, there are situations where that's out of your hands as an advocate. It might be out of the hands of someone who's a teacher or a doctor or a law enforcement officer. But it can also be helpful just to, if you're working with somebody and you know that things might get to that place, let them know really specifically what you have to report and when, so that they can choose what they want to share with you, because it might change what they want to share. And that might make you feel like the connection is breaking down, but it's more important for them to feel like the connection is authentic than for you to kind of lie about what you will and won't report based on your requirements if you are in a state or in a place where you are a mandated reporter. And again, domestic violence is not always something that is going to require Adult Protective Services just because someone has a disability. A disability does not make someone unable to or subject to Adult Protective Services necessarily. So that's just something to be aware of. Again, this could be an entire conversation and my time is narrowing down, but I just wanted to make sure that I included that because it is important. So again, we want to focus on not fixing the problem. You can offer solutions if you're asked. If someone says, I really just don't know how I'm going to get to work this week. What do you think? Or, a problem like that, maybe you could say, hey, we have an extra car. You're more than welcome to borrow it if that would be helpful. Or I can call you an Uber to get you to work tomorrow if that would be helpful. Just small things like that. Those are things that you can offer solutions if they're asked. But a lot of times it can feel like we want to jump in and fix everything. So it doesn't mean you can't express your concerns or offer solutions. There's just a way that you can do it without kind of being judgmental and also trying to control what that person does. So there's kind of some examples on the side. The first one is more judgmental and trying to fix, which is that's abuse. You need to call the police and file a report right now. This is something that you could be saying out of the really purest of concern that this is abuse. And I do want you to call the police and file a report because that seems like what I would do or what will be helpful. But it might not be what that person wants and it might not be helpful. You're coming from a place of what you would do in that situation or what you think they should do, not necessarily what they want to do or what they should do. So something that's more open and more kind could be, you don't deserve that. I'm sorry that happened to you. How can I help? What can I do? How can I be here? It can also be helpful to offer more direct solutions, but you can offer things like, can I buy you guys dinner? Can I DoorDash some food over for you and the kids? Can I call you that Uber? Would it be helpful to borrow the car? Little things like that can be helpful, offering solutions if asked, but that's much different than trying to fix the problem. Also believing survivors and letting you know you believe them and not blaming them for what happened or questioning the choices they made. So something that might express distrust is like, Jim's not like that. He's not like that when we go out. Did you do something to make him mad? And this could be distrust, like, I know Jim, he would never do that. Why are you lying about this? Like that could kind of convey that kind of perspective. Or maybe Jim and he doesn't seem like that. And maybe there was an argument that happened before. But if you phrase it this way, it really can feel like to that person that you're blaming them for what happened. But another way you could do that is just, thank you for telling me. I'm so sorry that Jim did that to you. And leaving the space, letting them fill in the silences if they want to, or just leaving those silences there and just being a calm presence who is showing support without trying to offer solutions that are overwhelming you or overwhelming that person. And then supporting and respecting their decisions. There are risks with every decision that a survivor makes, and there's not one way that someone should respond. So just because you might think that you would do something differently or you think that that's the right decision doesn't mean that it is. And there are risks to every decision. Sometimes staying is the safer decision for a survivor. Sometimes pretending like everything's okay or taking their abusive partner out on a fancy date to make them feel special. Sometimes those are the things that will keep that person the safest. It does not feel like it's what would get them out of the relationship, but it is something that might make them feel safer. Yeah, and I can't see your whole name, but I think it's Julia. Julia said, yes, Julia, that, you know, what you said about Jim could reinforce gaslighting by the abuser. So I think that's a really great point. I want to go back to what I said here because I think this is really great. Oh shoot. You know, Jim isn't like that. Did you do something to make him mad? Maybe Jim said, you know, if you would just have things done, I wouldn't have gotten so angry and this wouldn't have happened. If you would just listen, if you would just do X, Y, Z, I wouldn't lose my cool so much. So it's important that, yeah, like Julia said, we might be echoing things that the abusive person has said to our friend or to the person we're trying to support. So yeah, we want to respect their decisions. We don't want to show a lack of support. Like, well, if it's as bad as you're saying, why are you still around? If he's really that terrible, you would have dumped him by now. You know, why would you let him be around your kids if you know he's like this? Those things are not very supportive. They may be real concerns and questions you have, but those are questions that are more questions for you to think about rather than bringing them up with that person right now. So more supportive would be like, you're doing the very best you can in a terrible situation. I'm so sorry. That statement, you're doing the very best you can in a terrible situation, is something that I have said probably over 1,000 times, because it's true. For the vast majority of people, they are doing the very best they can in a terrible situation to keep themselves and their kids safe. People don't want abuse to get worse. They don't want their situation to get worse. They don't want their kids to be in danger. They are usually doing things that we cannot see on a daily basis to do that, and recognizing that and not acting like we're seeing the entirety of the relationship can be things that can really help with support. And then there are things that you can do to help build connections in your community. So if you are an advocate either for people with disabilities or for survivors, or if you're a mental health counselor, or if you work at like a bookstore in your community and just want to know what's available for your friends and for other people, it can be helpful to learn about what organizations are around and if they are accessible and accommodating for people with disabilities. This can also be knowing, like, are they queer friendly? Are they trans friendly? Are they helpful for people of color? Do they speak Spanish? Do they have people who speak other languages for people who are maybe here as refugees or recent arriving immigrants, or people who just speak other languages for all sorts of different reasons? That can be helpful to know. And share information with other community organizations about what kind of support is available. You know, I have gone to my primary care doctor before and been like, did you know that you can call my work and an advocate will come and talk to your patients within an hour, and they will kind of be able to help them see what their needs are, what their strengths are, and what's available for them. Just sharing these things casually can be really helpful. Offering help to those in need, like, it doesn't have to be something that puts yourself in danger, but just accompanying them to appointments, offering childcare or other forms of transportation, or taking care of their pets can be very helpful. And to just keep learning about domestic violence and support and disabilities and share your knowledge, talking to people in the community, just being aware. Maybe it's volunteering or just putting posters or flyers in the library for an organization that you have received services from or work with or support in whatever your capacity may be. It can be helpful to share those so other people can see it. So what comes next? I'm all done for now with the presentations that I've done on this topic. If you visit the Self-Advocacy Project website that I've linked here, they have archives of the previous webinars I've done, all of the other really great webinars that they've done. They have webinars every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, I believe, on all sorts of different topics. All of those webinars are there and available, and I'm sure they're great. And then there's some other resources. Some of these are national, some of these are New Jersey centered. And then this last link, how to help a friend, colleague, or peer, goes into a lot more depth than I had the time for today about how you can do that. And then I have just some more references here if you're interested in learning more about the things that I cited in this presentation or just learning more about the topic. Those are there. But other than that, that kind of ends the information that I had prepared to talk about today. This is a tough topic all the time because I could make every one of these slides a week-long discussion and workshop with resources and things like that. But within the hour that we have, this is what we have time for. So I appreciate you all listening and being patient with our audio issues and with also getting like sometimes what feels like just enough information to now start being worried that you need to know more. That's very normal. Sometimes this can feel like Pandora's box that you start to learn more and more about this, and then there's more and more you want to know or more and more you're frustrated with, and that's normal. And also, there are solutions to that, including just looking at some of those webinars and some of the resources that have been shared both by me and by the self-advocacy program. So that's all I have on this. My email's in the chat. Please reach out to me if you have any other questions. Thank you for those of you who shared in chat. I really appreciate it. And I will pass it back over to Erin and Bianca.
Thank you so much, Ember. So just reiterating again, um, if this webinar is over and you have questions, you have something you want to talk about, if it's a year from now, if it's 10 years from now, just know that there is someone that can help you and will talk to you. Please reach out to, if not us, if not Ember, then someone, because there are people that are there to help you. Um, if you would like to rewatch these four wonderful, very informative webinars that Ember has hosted, they are on our website. This last one will be on our website in about 2 days once it's done compiling and doing all the fun things that Zoom does behind the scenes. But they will all be on our website, and you can also go on our website, which I put the link in the chat to sign up for our future webinars. So I want to give a huge, huge thank you to Ember. Ember, this was so informative, so much information, like you said. It could be, it could be a year-long topic that is talked about, and still we won't be able to cover everything. So thank you for doing it in a way that is easy to understand and easy to relate to. And I want to thank everybody for attending these webinars as well. If there are any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box or in the chat. Otherwise, I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of their Tuesday. And thank you again for being here. I don't see any questions, but again, just because the webinar is over does not mean that you can't reach out. Just reach out and let us know. All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a fantastic rest of your day.